Welcome to the third webinar hosted by the Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse. The Smart Growth Information Clearinghouse, a project of the Smart Growth Network, is funded by the U.S. EPA, Office of Sustainable Communities, and managed by the Maryland Department of Planning. SmartGrowth.org is your one-stop on the web for most current information on effective growth, development, and preservation practices. We provide timely news and information about events, funding opportunities, awards, and resources. Today, we present Smart Strategies to Transform Commercial Districts, which was inspired by the Local Initiative Support Corporation's Metro Edge program and its work on commercial corridors and districts in 51 neighborhoods in 17 cities throughout the U.S. This webinar will present the key elements needed to transform commercial districts and help communities take the reins of their economic futures. We will hear from 5 economic development experts. First, Elizabeth Demetriou will tell us about the LISC and the Metro Edge program. Then, Joe Bookman will explain transforming corridors through information and action. Following that, Terry Benally will discuss the Business Assistance Program during 3 years of light rail construction in Mesa, Arizona. And finally, Larissa Ortiz and Sandy Salzman will share with us the Model Block Project, an effort to revitalize a strategically selected block along the East Girard corridor in Fishtown, Philadelphia. Following the presentations by our 5 panelists, they will answer any questions that we have time for during a question and answer period. Please submit your questions using the Q&A tool on your WebEx Event Center and not the chat tool. Questions will be assembled and posed by the moderator during the Q&A time. So on your Q&A tool, that's how you access it. That opens up the Q&A tool. You type in your question, then click send. So we're going to get started. Let me introduce our first presenter. Elizabeth Demetriou, AICP, is the Director of Economic Development for LISC. Elizabeth oversees LISC's economic development initiatives, delivering a comprehensive package of grants, technical assistance, and capital. This supports job creation, business expansion, and the development of healthy, desirable communities that attract private investment, entrepreneurship, and economic growth. She has a master's of urban planning and more than a decade's experience working on economic development, commercial revitalization, and workforce development in the nonprofit and government sectors. Elizabeth is on the board of the Urban Manufacturing Alliance and is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. Good afternoon, Elizabeth.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, John, and thank you, Smart Growth Network, for hosting, and the Maryland Planning Department for coordinating today's webinar. So I'm going to give a brief overview of LISC to add some context to today's presentation. LISC is a nonprofit community development financial institution, or CDFI, that has been investing in distressed communities for over 35 years. By equipping struggling communities with the capital, strategy, and know-how, we help create places where people can thrive. So how do we do it? We provide local community organizations with loans, grants, and equity investments, local, state, and federal policy support, and technical and management assistance. While we are a national organization, the magic really happens at the local level. We have offices in 31 cities across the country and operate a robust rural program in over 1,400 counties in 42 states. The presentations you will hear later today really showcase the great work of 2 of our LISC local offices, LISC Philadelphia and LISC Phoenix. Last year, we invested over $1.3 billion, our best year to date. And since 1980, we have invested $16.2 billion, which has leveraged $48.5 billion. This investment has created 348,000 affordable homes and apartments and over 53 million square feet of retail and community space. In 2007, we launched Building Sustainable Communities. It's our comprehensive approach that takes into account the needs of the entire community. Together with our partners, we invest in affordable housing, economic development, education, health, safety, and financial stability in select neighborhoods across the country. We believe that by carrying out multiple programs simultaneously and providing significant and ongoing investment, we are able to see historically disinvested places change in profound ways. I'm going to be focusing on stimulating economic development. We do this by investing in programs and projects that cultivate entrepreneurship, attract new businesses, and help get an area ready for investment. Our investment tools include new market tax credits, retail and commercial lending, and LISC small business, which I'll explain more in a moment. Our programs include LISC Metro Edge, crime and safety, and creative placemaking. For the purposes of today's presentation, I will be focusing on Metro Edge, but you can find out more about all of our programs at our website, lisc.org. Newly launched, LISC Small Business offers financing to small for-profit businesses for everything from acquisition to purchasing equipment to working capital. They offer flexible loan options from $1,000 to $5 million. With a national SBA license and a partnership with Kiva Zip, they are our go-to small business lender. They also offer advising services through LISC Insight and businessadvising.org. If you have businesses in need of capital, visit liscsmallbusiness.org for more info, or call me and I'll put you guys in touch. So today you're going to hear presentations from two of our Metro Edge consultants and work they did in Philadelphia and Arizona. So what is Metro Edge? Metro Edge creates smart economic development strategies for specific local places. We work with our partners to identify local and regional assets. Inspire investors to take a different view of disinvested markets and help communities take the reins of their economic futures. Our goal is really to create the conditions necessary to attract catalytic investment in commercial real estate, small businesses, and the business corridors where they reside. In different neighborhoods, catalytic means different things. And so we don't mean size, we mean impact. To make this all happen, we've developed a four-pronged approach that leverages our comprehensive approach, our relationships with local stakeholders, and our financing and technical assistance tools. Analysis and organizing. Bringing together stakeholders and conducting a market analysis not only provides key information to create a plan for investment, but it serves as a tool to engage and organize business and other stakeholders to discuss the potential and future of an area. Plan development and implementation. The info in the previous prong is used to create a roadmap. With limited resources, the need for a focused and targeted effort becomes crucial to the success of a revitalization effort. And for small business development, we feel it's important to align the work of small business assistance organizations to the corridor itself. In many cases, these organizations operate citywide and wait for small businesses to find them. By connecting local businesses to these efforts, we help them receive this really important and valuable assistance that they need to thrive. Making these resources place-based also enables local residents with entrepreneurial dreams to access these valuable resources. And real estate investment. Earlier we talked about how our goal is to create the momentum needed to get investors interested in the area. But we also market community-backed development and business opportunities to brokers and developers. We use tools like OpSites to highlight opportunities. We do this through vacant space activation events, tours of development sites, networking at trade conferences, and disseminating collateral information with market analysis data to interested parties. So today we're going to hear about how this work played out in Philly and Arizona. And as I mentioned earlier, we work primarily in low-income areas. But I think the elements listed here apply to all areas. In order to really attract catalytic capital, you need a clear understanding of local and regional market trends and an action plan that balances a community's vision with market realities. You need a strong local and place-focused organization to oversee plan implementation, advocate for capital investments in public infrastructure, and shepherd the revitalization process through its entire course. And you need a clear set of stakeholders, including city and state government, willing to invest capital in the physical infrastructure, real estate, and businesses of the community. So that's all I have to say, and hopefully some of this will resonate as you listen to the presentation later today. And this is my contact info if anybody needs me.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. Next on today's webinar panel is Joel Bookman. Joel, the principal of Bookman Associates, is a national consultant in community and economic development, urban commercial redevelopment, and strategic planning. As a consultant for LISC Metro Edge, he has coordinated commercial market analyses and assessments in 16 Chicago neighborhoods and assisted in creating economic development strategies in more than 24 cities and 60 communities across the country. He previously was managing director and co-founder of the LISC Institute for Comprehensive Community Development and director of programs for LISC Chicago. For 23 years, he served as executive director of the North River Commission and Lawrence Avenue Development Corporation on Chicago's northwest side, leading one of the nation's preeminent and oldest neighborhood economic development programs that catalyzed over $350 million of investment and the creation or retention of over 3,500 jobs. We welcome Joel. Good afternoon, Joel.
Good afternoon, John. Okay, want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face in transforming our commercial districts. These days, we all face a lot of challenges as we're trying to fix up our corridors, wrestle with the difficulties that we face in coming up with activities to improve our neighborhoods, improve the shopping, the goods and services, and that sort of thing. Many of us have miles and miles of commercial street that frequently have vacancies, that have burned out buildings, that have deteriorated properties, and it's not an easy fix for us to come in and try and figure out what to do or how to address it. At the same time, we're wrestling with social problems, we're wrestling with a changing national economy. We're facing competition from regional malls that take our stores and our shoppers away from us. And then there's stores like Walmart and Target and others that compete for our business. We all want to see a mix of goods and services in our neighborhoods. We all want to have a nice grocery store. But today, as we speak, about 17% of all grocery shopping now is done in big boxes like Costco, Walmart, and Target. Given all the challenges, it's really sort of a wonder that we're around at all. It's not an easy thing to do. What that means, though, is that if we want to be successful in transforming our neighborhoods, if we want to be successful in transforming our corridors, we need a combination of good data, the best information we can provide, as well as sound strategies and a united effort to really focus on changing our corridors. Metro Edge was formed originally out of Shorebank in Chicago. It became a part of LISC in 2005, and it is designed to provide that sort of information and those sorts of strategies that can be used to transform the corridors. The services that you see on your screen are examples, information profiles, which are snapshots of what's going on right now, assessments looking at the environment as well as the marketplace, comprehensive retail scans, which look more deeply and analyze the opportunities as well as the assets and challenges in each of these corridors, and then what we call core intensive corridor development, which is really an in-depth look at the data, the strategies, and hands-on assistance to folks in their neighborhoods over 12 to 18 months, helping them take the necessary steps and providing the necessary coaching and training that can make this sort of work possible. Now, as we are doing this work and as we go into neighborhoods around the country, one of the things we find is that a lot of folks want to see new stores on the corridor. And they start out and they go out and they approach retailers and say, we want you to come in. And most of them fail. And they fail because they haven't done the necessary steps to get their community retail ready. To be successful, a commercial corridor has to have density, it has to have enough people, enough rooftops, so that a retailer can make some money. You've got to be accessible, you have to have transportation access, have to be able to get to the corridor. It's got to be safe enough that you feel like shopping there, that you want to walk the streets, it's a walkable community. There needs some existing retail because otherwise you're coming into an island in the middle of nowhere. And so you can't start it up out of nothing. You need to look for some strength upon which to build. And then finally, you need the community capacity to make it happen. Without that capacity, there's a lot of great ideas, and there are a lot of typical market analyses that sit on a shelf somewhere, but they never get done because the community isn't energized, mobilized, focused, and having the skills necessary to get their projects done. So we see sort of a pyramid, or on the right of your screen, you see sort of the pedestal that we see. The first thing you need to do if you want to attract retail into your corridor in a smart, thoughtful way is to make it safe and clean. Bringing people together to make it as safe as possible, as clean as possible, addressing some of the maintenance issues, things like parking and that sort of thing, and only then can you be successful in retaining businesses and attracting them. I say retention first because a lot of folks go out and try and attract new businesses into their corridors, but the easiest and the first step in the process is go to those businesses that are already there and help the person who has one storefront grow into 2 storefronts. The person with 2 storefronts grow into 3 storefronts. Why? Because they're already there, they're already invested, they're already either sold on the neighborhood or stuck in the neighborhood, and so they're an easier shot than going to some stranger who doesn't know your community and saying, oh, please come into my neighborhood. It's the easiest way to fill vacancies is focus first on the people that are there. You have the relationships with them, you have people who are customers in the neighborhood, you can build off that. As you do those things, then you're in a position to be able to attract new businesses into your communities. Now, one of the things that I can't stress enough is that actions affect attitudes. Part of the Metro Edge process is about putting together early action projects that transform corridors quickly, small, inexpensive, visible projects that can be done in 3 to 6 months, usually, that make things look better. Why? Because actions affect attitudes. I've got a little lapel pin on the screen from the Canadian Cancer Society. And the reason I do that is because a few years ago, the University of Western Ontario did a study. They went to Toronto and they gave 100 people lapel pins to wear on their lapels and for an entire day. And then they gave another 100 people lapel pins. At the same time, they chose 200 other people, and they didn't wear lapel pins. They made a pitch for the Canadian Cancer Society, and the next day they asked people to donate. The people who wore the lapel pins gave money 42% more than the people who didn't wear lapel pins. The sheer act of putting on a lapel pin that said Canadian Cancer Society changed the way people thought and their willingness to give money. Now that's just to say that taking action begins to transform behavior. And whether it's wearing a lapel pin or landscaping your corridor or putting up a mural or cleaning the windows, the act of doing that begins to change the way people think about your neighborhood. It's not what people plan, it's not what they think, it's not what they put together in pretty booklets, it's what they do that begins to transform the corridors. Greater Fulton in Richmond, Virginia is one of my favorite examples about that. Folks in Greater Fulton didn't have a busy retail corridor. The LISC office there began working with the Neighborhood Resource Center, and they had a group of energized volunteers. They said, we need to do something. Actions affect attitudes. So on one weekend a few years ago, they brought 15 people together and they landscaped the corners of their commercial district, 15 corners in one day. It changed the look. People stood up. They said, something's happening here that hasn't been happening before. It created a buzz. It created excitement. They had a good time doing it. They built relationships and started talking to the business owners. A month later, they said, not a bad idea. We should do this again. And so instead of landscaping the next weekend, they said, let's put murals. Let's put murals on the sides of our buildings. And they went to a local art school and they got them to design murals and they put murals on. Did about 8 murals in one weekend. Again, dramatically changing the look of the street. A month later, they did a vanilla box treatment where they went to the vacant stores and they got the property owners to agree to take down the paper on the windows, and then they cleaned the windows, they cleaned the inside of the storefronts, they lit them up, and they put art in the windows. It changed the look of the street, but it also got the attention of the local councilwoman, Cynthia Newbill, who found $100,000 in the city budget to put in new trees, sidewalks, and lighting, because she said, it's clear to me people are making a difference, they care, they're energized, they're invested, I want to be a part of that, and I want to help invest in this corridor. Come a couple of years later, a year down the line, when the Stone Brewing Company was looking for an East Coast location, they looked at Fulton Hill, they looked at Richmond, and they decided to move into that neighborhood. Why? Because it looked cleaner, it looked safer, it looked better. They saw energized community folks. They saw rents that were reasonable. They looked at some trendy, funky neighborhoods and thought about putting a brew pub there. But when they saw this neighborhood that had reasonable rents, some vacancies, but a lot of committed people, they decided to come in and put in their brew pub and their brewing company. So it's that kind of action and that kind of energy that begins to transform neighborhoods, using data to develop good strategies and then energizing people around early action projects to start to make them happen. Downtown Mesa, Metro Edge began working with Terry Benally, Nedco, and LISC in about 2012 to do a profile of the community, and it was just that sort of a process where Metro Edge came in, they met with property owners, met with investors, met with retailers, we met with city officials, and got the lay of the land, got the on-the-ground information, and pulled together data necessary to make sound judgments about strategies for the future of the district. Now, the folks in Mesa, and Terry will talk a lot more about this, but just to give you a sense of what our analysis looks like, we worked with the goals that they set. Increasing profitability for merchants, having satisfied customers, increasing density, improving the appearance, and all centered around the fact that the light rail was coming. And one of the unique aspects of their work in Mesa was everyone loves the notion of light rail. It was coming to Mesa. The folks there said, before it comes, we want to be ready for the light rail. We want to take advantage of it. We want to keep our businesses in business during construction, and we want to help them grow so that they're positioned when the light rail opens to take advantage of these new customers. And that's what they did. So this is just, and our study is typically dozens of pages with lots of good information, but it's summarized in a few brief elements. Here, we noticed in our analysis, and we heard from everyone, that while there was a mix of goods and services on the corridor, the Mesa Art Center was a tremendous draw, and they needed to use that to help build out the rest of the corridor and use this specialization of the arts to help build traffic and to build the attractiveness of the corridor. There's demand for food shopping and food service and drinking that needed to be met. There was some light manufacturing, unmet demand for clothing and hardware, and there was a real opportunity to help the community grow. Part of what we do is we look at what we call the adjusted float, the leakage from the community. Where are dollars being spent and where are they going to? And we could see, for example, in looking at this chart, that there was $35 million being spent in the community on general merchandise stores, but there was only $12 million of supply. That tells us that $23 million was leaving the community and being spent elsewhere. So devising strategies that take advantage of that and attract some of those shoppers back to the area, showing general merchandise stores that you can make money in this community becomes a part of that strategy to attract business to downtown Mesa. This is an example of the kind of bubble maps that we do that sort of dig deep into various aspects of it. I mentioned that the downtown Mesa area is anchored by the Arts Center. We were able to get information from the Arts Center to track where their patrons and volunteers come from. So we could see the spread across the area, across the community where they're coming from. We could begin to talk with them about how to focus advertising. We could talk to businesses about how they might use these customers and this traffic to come into their neighborhood and to patronize their restaurants and their stores to take advantage of the people who are already coming. We worked with Downtown Mesa, with Nedco, and with LISC to develop a set of next steps, and this is just a summary of some of them, but it was putting together a coordinated effort where there were 5 or 6 different organizations that were doing different parts of it, getting them all working together under a central Main Street plan, marketing the area as a whole, emphasizing those underserved markets and going after those businesses that have potential, and using that market information to help small businesses that are in the community grow and take advantage of the customers who they could attract as a result of this process. Terry and her work did tremendous work in providing assistance to those small businesses. She's going to talk a lot more about that next. But this gives you the sense of activities. The other thing they did is they fixed up the corridor around the light rail, and they worked with the city to make sure that it was improved sufficiently, but also that it became this physical place that was pleasant to walk in, that had good signage, that had good lighting, good entryways, good banners, so that it became a walkable street that was an inviting place for placemaking activities that people would feel comfortable in and enjoy. It became a public square so that people could not only enjoy themselves, but they'd feel comfortable about going into the stores and restaurants and spending money there. One final piece, which is a part of everything we do, that we strongly encourage these organizations to celebrate and tell their story. There's all these negative issues to wrestle with, all the competition, but in most of our neighborhoods, there's really great things going on. The mass media doesn't talk about that much. They talk about if it bleeds, it leads. They emphasize the shootings, the killings, the drug dealer, anything that's wrong. If we want people to know something that's good in our downtown, and we want to attract retailers, we want to attract developers, we have to tell them what's good, and we have to tell it repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. One of the ways they did it in downtown Mesa, these pictures are all from the opening of the light rail this past August. And you can see they did everything from put up banners to have a huge celebration, to have confetti coming out as people cut ribbons, to having games for kids. They had entertainment, they had music, they put artwork all up and down the street. They created little mini plazas and mini parks. They created a sense of fun, excitement, and entertainment, which makes it an attractive place to bring business to their community and to help those existing businesses stay and expand. And that's what Terry is going to tell you about next. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Joel. Now we're going to go into a presentation by Terry Benally. Terry is the Executive Director of LISC Phoenix. After studying political science at Arizona State University, Terry became involved in neighborhood issues and spent her volunteer time with community development organizations. As an entrepreneur who has started 3 businesses, she realized the significance of asset building through micro-lending. That passion led her to Neighborhood Economic Development Corporation, where she served as Executive Director for 8 years. At LISC Phoenix, where Terry is now the Executive Director, she continues her leadership role in the community development financial institution arena. In 2014, Terry was unanimously appointed to the Mesa, Arizona City Council to fill an interim term. She remains active in the City of Mesa as a member of the Economic Development Advisory Board. As a fellow of the Flynn Brown Civic Leadership Cadre of future state leaders, she continuously strengthens her skills to address Arizona's long-term issues with special interest in urban economic development strategies.
So you guys have heard a lot about LISC and also Metro Edge, and this is kind of where the 2 previous presenters come together, at least with the story in Mesa, Arizona. So LISC uses community partners, and Elizabeth referred to this, community economic development partners in our case, and that was NEDCO, or Neighborhood Economic Development Corporation. But we also rely on a lot of other partners. There's no way that any one of these entities could fund the work that we did along this corridor to support businesses as they were in the throes of a 3-year light rail construction period. The top left corner, of course, shows the City of Mesa, and they were the money that we leveraged off of with all the other partners that we had. And I'll go through many of these in this presentation this afternoon. So I wanted to give you a timeline because I think it's really important to know that we didn't jump into this corridor in the middle of construction. Prior to construction starting, which the construction you can see started in 2012, we were embedded in the community as a microlender. So we knew a lot of the businesses along the corridor. You can imagine what it was like to be a small business owner in 2009, and actually prior to that, with the economy the way it was going or not going back then, and just trying to survive, I guess, the economy, much less being faced with a 3-year construction project that was going to be right outside of your front door. That picture on the left is outside of one of our businesses, and you can see that is actually a pretty mild picture of the construction. There was I think a 30-foot hole that had to be dug in the middle of the road, and just tractors and equipment that I don't even know what the heck it does, but it was doing it out in front of the stores, and it was loud, and it was not very inviting for your customers. So we were in there the summer of 2009 while they were doing environmental assessments, working with the businesses, trying to develop some event programming so that the businesses had reasons to attract customers to the corridor that we hoped to continue through the construction phase, and we did. And actually now there are 2 monthly events that happen that are pretty significant and has not only been beneficial to the businesses, but actually to the light rail also, because people can now take that light rail from one end of the commercial corridor to the other, and they're aware of it now because they had a reason to come down to the corridor. So this corridor was a 3-mile extension of the light rail. The light rail in Phoenix opened in 2008, and by 2012, when this construction began, the ridership, the predicted ridership of that light rail line had hit 2020 numbers. So successful light rail, which kept the businesses enthused that they would actually have additional customers if they suffered through this construction phase. With the first thing that we started with was some basic technical assistance for all of the businesses. So I told you 464 businesses were in this corridor. We had a little over 212 that signed up for one-on-one business consulting with a group of 21 consultants that were listed here. All of their expertise were listed here. Tried to not hire the jack of all trades, but get actual experts in their fields that could come in and do, we didn't have unlimited funds, so they did small work plans with each business where they would decide on the things that they kind of wanted to tackle first. And anybody that's been in economic development for a period of time knows that everybody wanted to tackle social media first because it's cheap, it's free, but maybe they're not thinking about the time that it takes to tackle a social media campaign, or the fact that once they get the customers in the door, maybe they're not coming back, and that might be the biggest clue to a successful business is keeping that repeat customer around. So the way that we got all of these businesses engaged in the consulting was to hold 1-hour weekly workshops where there was, we kept it to exactly an hour. We always let people out on time so they could get back to running their businesses. We had about a 20-minute period where we would do some education piece, so a presentation on a different topic. They were all presented by our expert consultants. About a 20-minute discussion period around what the topic was. And what turned out for the last 20 minutes was the ability for all of these businesses who had been holed up inside their stores to actually come together and do some networking, and ended up doing some joint marketing and just working together instead of telling your customer you don't want to go across the street and buy a piece of their pizza because it's awful, because your pizza is better, of course. We just decided to work collaboratively with each other, and that was a hurdle, and support each other so that we could all get through this light rail period. So we were out on the street with the businesses a year before the first shovel ever went in the ground to start this construction period. So businesses were used to working with each other. They were used to telling stories to each other about where they were with things. And when things got a little bit hairy during the construction period, they were engaged enough to share their stories, and nobody kind of felt alone in this process, which was probably the biggest thing that came out of this technical assistance program, was getting these businesses to act as a cohesive corridor. You'll see that the City of Mesa encouraged businesses to show up by giving an electric rebate in the summertime. The city happened to own the utilities in our downtown. And if businesses showed up to 4 of our workshops, and that's all they had to commit to was 4 hours, they would get a 20% rebate on their electric bill in the summertime for 3 months. The city actually bumped it up to 4 months each year. Or a minimum of $250, which for some businesses that paid a couple of months of electricity bills. You can imagine at 118, 115 degrees, your electricity bill is pretty expensive here in Arizona. We ended up getting 4 different kind of business groups together, a general merchant meeting, a Hispanic Business Alliance that I'll talk about a little bit more. It was wildly successful. a restaurant group, and a retail group. So during the time that we were running this one-on-one business consulting, we were continually looking for opportunities to collaborate with other partners, basically bringing additional funding into the program, leveraging the dollars that the city had given to us for the business assistance program. And we found Arizona State University had a Center for Technology and Innovation, and it was basically their beginnings of what is now a very successful entrepreneur program through Arizona State University. And there were about 28 students that were in this entrepreneur program. They were probably juniors working on their bachelor's, and they had written business plans before, and they had done all kinds of things on paper about how they were going to be successful entrepreneurs. And between them and the staff and a consultant that knew the businesses we were working with, we pulled out about 20 Hispanic businesses that these students would work with, along with their professors. Really interesting things that the kids worked on. One of the things was website presence, because many of the businesses did not have a website presence, and we know that the Latino population here in Arizona does a lot with their cell phones, so a web presence was really important. And many of the businesses just didn't have the wherewithal financially to go through with developing a website. So we came up with a very simple website that cost $99 a year to host. There was a photographer in the class that went out and took pictures of the businesses. Many of the businesses were food restaurants. They took pictures of the food and helped them all kind of get online. We have one ridiculously successful success story to relay. We had a business whose income doubled, 100% doubled, and he was able to actually move out of the rented store that he had and move into a building where he purchased, and we, of course, help with that financing here at LISC. This is just one of the flyers from the business. We had a business that opened, Republica Empanada, that opened next to an urban garden, and I will tell you the significance of that with the community was just phenomenal. The community had started an urban garden in our downtown, and at the same time that this gentleman in the picture up here on the right, Marco, had opened or had bought a building with the hopes of opening a Pan-Latin American restaurant, and just the synergy between the people coming to the garden was really treated as a community space, and this business opening up. Us with our restaurant consultant in there, we had a liquor consultant that went in and helped them, even a design consultant that went in and helped him arrange his kitchen, really helped this business get launched. And it has been written up in many of the newspapers here in Phoenix as kind of one of the top 10 places to be. So besides the one-on-one consulting and the electric rebate and the local entrepreneur assistance program with Arizona State University, we have a pretty strong localist group, a localist business group here called Local First Arizona. And we worked with them to put together this Small Wonders map, and that's the front of it on the left-hand side, where inside the map is a map of the corridor. There is pictures of a picture of the inside of the restaurant or the retail shop, along with information about how to get in touch with the shop, website, address. And these maps are distributed by Local First. They make 55,000 of them and distribute them to mostly tourist places, but chambers of commerce, hotels, the airport, and then they also hold lots of localist events where you can pick up these maps throughout the valley, actually. So we put together a small grant program where for $200 you could get your location put on the Small Wonders map. Now, all of our grants were first come, first serve. So if you didn't show up to our merchant meetings, you really kind of didn't get to hear about them because, this shows that there were only 26 grants available, and you had to know about it, and people typically came to the meeting, signed up that day, and got in on the grant. So for $200, you got the location in the Small Wonders map. We had a web presence called Find It in Mesa, where it had the calendar of events and also all of the information about the businesses. And at the same time, Google was starting to put together Google Inside View. And Mesa happened to be a beta site for this program, so we had about 20 businesses that were randomly chosen. We had nothing to do with this, but we caught wind of it, for Google to go in and do their photography and do an inside view. And if you're familiar with it, when you go to a Google page, when you're just searching for a shop online, you can go to their Google page or Google kind of sidebar, and you can click on Inside View, and you can actually, it's a camera that takes you inside the business, and you can do a 360-degree turnaround and see everything that's in that business. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm traveling and I see, you know, a local restaurant or someone tells me about a local restaurant that I want to potentially try, I'm a little bit apprehensive when I see that it's something small, and this kind of gets you over that fear. You go in, you kind of see what the place looks like, and you can kind of get over your fear of going in that place the first time. So these were some of the marketing tools that we used with the businesses. We had over 50 businesses that were listed on the website. Only 26 were part of the Small Wonders map. And with the map, they also got a membership to Local First so that they could engage in their technical assistance programs as well. One of the other investors in our program was State Farm, and there was a grant that they had, a $60,000 grant for facade improvements. And a group of us had just been actually to a Smart Growth conference in Kansas City. I don't know if you guys remember that, a couple of years ago. And we learned how to do a walking audit. Well, we went on one, and we thought we knew how to do a walking audit. So the first thing that we did when we were told that we had this $60,000 grant to do some facade improvements was take the community. We advertised a breakfast event, and we took the community, and these pictures are of the alleyway behind the businesses. The front side of those businesses is where all the tractors and construction equipment was. So we took the community on this walk behind the alleyways, and we asked them to talk about what they saw. And you can see the picture on the left. That was is a pretty upscale beauty salon, and not very inviting from the back. And that's probably, on a scale of 1 to 10, they were probably a 3 in inviting, and we had plenty of 0s or 1s where you thought it was just the place where a business might be taking out the trash. So lots of input from the community about what they saw and what they thought could be dressed up on the backs of these alleyways, which is where the parking is for these businesses. And we took the information. We went to one of our merchant meetings, and 18 businesses signed up to be a part of this grant program. We initially thought we would be able to help 12 businesses with a $5,000 improvement, and the businesses had to match 25% of the money. So, you know, the outcome would have been about a $6,100 improvement. We ended up, some of the businesses didn't take advantage of the full $5,000, but that's how we got to 18. Anyway, the next thing that we did was bring in an architect that had been hired by our Metro Valley Rail to design one of the stations at a future extension of the light rail. And while he was in town from Portland, Oregon, he walked the corridor with us, walked these alleyways with us, and gave us some ideas about kind of the most effective and efficient way that we could use this small pot of money. And he suggested that the signage be improved, that we did some paint on the buildings to kind of try and mask all of these wires and boxes, and also add these awnings. And 18 of the businesses did that. The total investment on the business side, and this is in the second year of construction where revenues were down, was $252,000. So they blew away the 25% of the match to our grant and really made a difference on this corridor. Inviting people in through kind of the back door, which is where their preferred customer entrance was, made it look right, and attach it to the parking. One of the things that we encouraged the businesses to do was never talk about construction when they were out there trying to advertise their business, and to always direct people how to get into their business without going down Main Street, which is where the tractors and construction equipment was. So I talked about this walking audit. One of the things that Joel mentioned, and we believe is really important, is to have the community at the table when you're working on these corridors. And because our area was turning from a street, a car-centric street, to a light rail-centric street, a transit-oriented development community, we did some walking audits where we took people for walks on the sidewalk to see kind of the things that were in the way. I think I showed you some pretty pictures here. We have sidewalks that don't even connect from one side of the street to the other. Our bike audit showed kind of the dangers of our street and how dangerous it is to ride a bike, and we've been working really closely with the city on a complete streets concept for our commercial corridor, and also some bicycle safety. Biking is hugely attractive or important here in Arizona because we get so few days of rain. And I know it sounds silly to be out on a bike when it's 115, but the breeze feels pretty good until you stop your bike. This is another tool that we used for the community to introduce them to this whole idea of transit-oriented development and make them feel comfortable with coming to our commercial corridor. We held an urban summit where we invited developers and funders to talk about what our downtown could eventually turn into. We have a guidebook for residents that puts in seriously layman terms all of the elements of a transit-oriented development community, that projects should be within a quarter mile of the light rail station. We think it's actually a little bit tighter than that here in Arizona, and just the connections to the neighborhood and all of these different pieces. It's actually a really interesting tool, and the Department of Transportation federally is using this as something when they're going in to talk about transit-oriented communities, and it's available on our website. You can go and pull it up and potentially use it with your community if you're looking at a transit-oriented development transition. One of the things that Elizabeth talked about was our creative placemaking. So not only did LISC Phoenix here use the Metro Edge tool in the LISC toolbox of commercial corridors, but because of the Mesa Art Center, which Joel referred to, that has over 500 visitors a year, we thought it was really important to bring into the commercial corridor some of this creative placemaking, or actually some of this color. Anybody that is on the phone from Arizona knows that we joke about Mesa Beige, and that really was what kind of the color of the corridor before we started bringing in these different art elements. So, of course, there were some murals that were adapted, but we kind of copied a program from Minneapolis that was called Irrigate, and they were small grants that we gave to artists that would, the artists would go into a business and invite kind of their community, their following, to come into that business and experience one of their art projects. So some may have been, you know, a musician coming into a restaurant and playing, but it exposed the followers of the musician to a new restaurant. Some of them were actually art projects where the community would come into a retail outlet and do an art project, and again, they would, you know, gain the exposure of the business to some new clients. Now, of course, the business's opportunity to keep those clients coming back, but it was, you know, something that we could do to help expand their customer base. One of the murals that came out of it was this one on the left. We had a gentleman who bought the only vacant piece of property on Main Street. It was, we call it the Sliver Lot because it was a very narrow, long lot. And he actually, once a month, wanted to do a community event. So we show a movie on the side of, that's a pawn shop, actually. And the pawn shop let us do this mural on the side of it and make it look like a TV, and that's where we show movies every second Friday. The right-hand side is obviously one of the movies. And a group of the creative placemaking artists got together and did this little kind of very grassroots feeling signage that's in a like a oil can or a barrel, a 50-gallon drum, and that sign talks about how far away it is to walk to the stores that are close by to this Sliver Lot. This is back to the urban garden. So next to this urban garden, this picture up on the top left was what the city rented to us for $1 a year. Actually, it was a little more beige than that when we got it. We painted murals on all the back walls. The restaurant to the left, you can barely see it. The middle of that picture on the left is where Republic Empanada is. And within that picture on the top right is 1 year after the urban garden opened. So we have plots in there for people to come and do gardening. There's a little, free library. They hold yoga classes. They hold salsa dancing classes. We have art shows in the garden. It really is kind of the public community space where you don't have to be in an establishment, spending money and buying something. You can just kind of come hang out in the shade, of course. We have to do that here in Arizona. But it's really kind of the community center that's outside and a place where you don't have to have reservations. You just come hang out. We've had several weddings in the Mesa Urban Garden, so it's just a place for everyone to be and to talk about what the vision of this downtown community can be. I think that that's about all I have to say. I do want to talk about, just wrap up a couple of things. So Joel talked about how important accessibility is, and that would be the farthest thing that you would think of when you're faced with a construction period. But that was one of the reasons why we were so engaged in the Activate the Alleyway Facade program, so that customers had accessibility to the businesses. He talked about safety being a big part of the corridor. We kind of already have that piece wrapped up, which is usually a huge hurdle. But this area that I've been talking about actually has a business improvement district that does a phenomenal job around safety and cleanliness. I mean, it's the cleanest place you'll ever come to. Not that attracted people to come to the stores, but it definitely gives a sense of safety if we can get the marketing and the rest of the commercial corridor kind of really up to speed. Parking isn't a problem right now because we don't have the density in the downtown yet of customers or actually people living down there. That is one of the pieces that we're currently working on. But we definitely have the community at the table fighting for the city to make right decisions. Currently, there's an auto-centric business that wants to get a temporary use permit for 10 years at one of our transit stations, and the community is ready to go advocate at a city council meeting to say that we are not in favor of this temporary use. We want to really follow the area plan that talks about car-centric businesses not being appropriate. This commercial corridor actually is the old Route 66, so lots of single-story hotels and lots of auto dealerships and mechanics. And I guess the most important thing of all of this is to tell you that there was a net zero loss of business on this corridor. So 464 businesses a year before construction started, and when the light rail opened 4 years later, after 3 years of construction, we actually gained 2 businesses, but they're not all the same businesses that were there. Of course, if several went out of business or moved their business to a more appropriate location, but we didn't have a loss, and that retention of business is what makes this commercial corridor viable, and we're working on the next phase of the business development, which would be attraction to the corridor. Thanks for listening, and hope you visit our website and use the TOD guidebook.
Well, thank you, Terry. Thank you very much. And our last presentation today is going to be coming from Sandy Salzman and Larissa Ortiz. Larissa is the principal of Larissa Ortiz and Associates. She specializes in developing retail strategies for business districts in urban markets. She is the author of Improving Tenant Mix, a guide for commercial district practitioners, real estate redevelopment and reuse, and is founder and editor of the Commercial District Advisor newsletter and blog, www.commercialdistrictadvisor.com. Since founding LOA in 2008, Larissa has developed retail and implementation strategies for over 80 districts nationwide. Larissa is a mayoral appointee to the New York City Planning Commission and teaches at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. She serves on the board of the International Downtown Association and as Eastern Division co-chair of the International Council of Shopping Centers P3 Retail Program. A Watson Fellow and Fulbright Scholar, Larissa holds a master's in city planning from the Massachusetts Institution of Technology. Sandy is the executive director of the New Kensington Community Development Corporation in Philadelphia. Ms. Salzman is a lifelong resident of the Fishtown community. She has been involved in civic affairs for more than 30 years. She's been an employee of NKCDC since 1995, where she has played an integral role in turning New Kensington into a multifaceted organization that does real estate development, housing counseling, community organizing, economic development, and land use management. The creation of the Land Use Management Program has made the Fishtown Kensington neighborhoods into a national model for community stabilization and revitalization. Well, welcome to you, ladies. Oh, yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm pleased to share with you our experience working with New Kensington CDC and the Philadelphia LISC office in a program we call Corridors of Retail Excellence. And we're going to share with you one project that came out of that. And you know, first I want to sort of share our approach. I think Joel did a great job explaining Metro Edge in general, and this program, Corridors of Retail Excellence, is something that emerged after many years of practicing and trying to figure out a real methodology. And I think we came across something that can be replicated in many communities. You know, the idea of this program was to spend 18 months identifying an initiative that we would then fund. And that initiative would be catalytic, strategic, and high impact. The idea is that we would do something that would drive sales and support existing businesses. As a result of the success, we'd enhance credibility for the organization that we were partnering with, and we wanted to use it to leverage additional funding for future efforts. In this case, our funders were PNC Bank. LISC, Metro Edge provided the technical assistance. We could not have done this without our local offices and a local CDC, and the CDCs were selected on a competitive basis. And the program really has three parts. The first is an assessment where, you know, we would go conduct a site visit, talk to stakeholders, you know, look at the physical conditions, community priorities, and market data, and really come back with a diagnosis and a set of early action recommendations that would then be put into play. And we had a menu of things we could select from. It could be redevelopment, it could be retail sales, it could be improving tenant mix through, you know, conducting storefront strolls or helping address some administrative management issues. This program came with $25,000 of funds to execute. And so every community had a different sort of menu of options that we offered them. And then we measured impact over time. So the first phase, you know, is very quick and dirty. I call it almost the anti-planning effort, because we got in and we tried to figure out where there was a consensus for action through a, you know, walking tour, interviews with local leaders, and a market scan. And then we came back fairly quickly, within, you know, 5 to 6 weeks, and shared our assessment of the capacity of the organizations. We didn't want to suggest something that they were going to find challenging to get done. The physical conditions that we might be able to mitigate through our recommendations. You know, the issues around the business environment that, again, we might be able to help with our recommendations, and the market scan. Then we, you know, the last phase is really measuring outputs, and outputs are both qualitative and quantitative. What's unique about this program is we had a journalist, who we call a scribe, follow us through the whole process and share the story, because so much of this is about sharing positive stories. Then we actually measured impact. How many new businesses? What kind of pedestrian counts, you know, how they were improved over time, how much investment was leveraged, and we got a lot of local news coverage. So what makes this program unique? The diagnostic was the main tool for engagement. That was what allowed us to define a menu of options. We competitively selected our CDCs and service providers, and we competitively selected any consultant that was used to actually implement the projects. Communications and PR was really critical. PNC was a fantastic partner. They gave us their whole PR division to you know, support the press events that we had at the end of this. And then it was very action and outcome oriented. I said, you know, early on in this process, we want a project that we can sell, that photographs really well at the end of 18 months. So I'm going to pass it over to Sandy, who can speak to some of to NKCDC and the context, neighborhood context.
Good afternoon, everybody. So we decided to work in the 300 block of Girard Avenue. This here is Girard and Frankfurt is really the epicenter of our commercial district. You want to do the next slide? And you can see this is Girard Avenue. It's a very wide street. It's at Frankfurt Avenue. And in the background, you can see Center City, Philadelphia. And while it looks like Center City, Philadelphia in this picture is like a block away, it's really about 2 miles away. But it does give you an idea of just how close we are. We're to the northeast of Center City, Philadelphia, along the Delaware River. And you can see those businesses along Girard Avenue are relatively old buildings. They were built probably between the 1880s and the 1920s, and there's some new construction that's going on in the background there. Next slide. And this is a wider view of Girard Avenue. So again, in this picture, you can get a better perspective of where Center City is in the background, and you can see a lot more about our commercial district along Girard Avenue. This here is actually the 200 block of Girard Avenue, and you can see it's a mix. It's not all commercial businesses. There is a lot of residential interspersed within the commercial, and we are trying to bring back the commercial aspect of the neighborhood. So we really wanted to make it into an area that would be commercial, and it would match Frankfurt Avenue, because Frankfurt Avenue right now is our commercial area. Both streets are very walkable. While Girard Avenue isn't as closely connected as Frankfurt Avenue because it's such a wide street, it is walkable, and there are a number of businesses along here that you can go in and out of. So I'm going to pass this back over.
Thanks. You know, so those are the conditions we faced when we got there. Wide street, you know, inconsistent retail. You know, there are gaps in the pedestrian environment. You can see, you know, residential door facing the sidewalk. Very difficult to cross, but there were some really nice things happening. You know, the CDC and other partners were putting out, you know, flower barrels. There were murals. There were landscaped empty lots. You know, some streetscape furniture, although, you know, cognizant of some of the graffiti on the poles. And one of the things we stumbled upon unexpectedly was this great block. You can see on the right, you know, these beautiful buildings. And most of this block on the right was vacant, but for one storefront at the time. But we thought, wow, it had great bones. I'll get to that in a second. There were a number of vacancies on the street, which also really broke up the experience of the pedestrian. But we knew there were opportunities. We had two sort of nodes of retail that were disconnected. And this block, this is another view of the block I mentioned earlier, we saw as an opportunity to connect those things. You know, we know retail density is so critical to successful business environments, so we wanted to give this street a little more retail density and mitigate these gaps. And the image on the right is also of the end of the model block, which had a vacant lot on it. And so we identified this as a real opportunity. We came back after the assessment with actually 3 options for what they could do. One was to activate some of those vacant lots that you saw. The second, you know, we had heard that marketing was an issue, and we wanted, you know, district marketing came up as something we heard from stakeholders. And then the last was that model block I mentioned. What was amazing was that within 1 month, NKCDC acted on one of our recommendations, applied for and received a $25,000 city grant to do the marketing. So right away, you know, that we had a win. But they selected the model block program, and you know, as we said, I think one of the business owners said this so well. We have restaurants and bars as anchors on either end of the street, and now we have, with this, we have an anchor in the middle. It will draw traffic to us from either end. And that was a business owner saying what we had hoped would happen with this, and it's been an incredible success. So this is the model block, and the goal was really to make a block pop, to fill vacancies. You know, with such a wide block, how do you catalyze and demonstrate that investment is occurring? In addition to actually the model block, we did a merchandising manual that made recommendations for storefront improvements for the entire East Girard Avenue. So that was another outcome from this project. But architects were hired, and Make Architecture and Planning was selected through a competitive process. And what they did was they prepared these very nice renderings for property owners to help them visualize the kinds of improvements that could be done. And keep in mind, we had a $25,000 budget, so much of this was just cosmetic, you know, painting, a little lighting, and a sign. And these were shared with the property owners so that we could enlist and enroll them. This is the model block before. You can see the vacant lots. And there was one full-time business when we started this project. And when we looked at this block, we said, if we're going to enroll these property owners, we have to know, you know, if we want to do this model block, we have to know these property owners are engaged. So the CDC, before selecting this option, tried to talk to every single business owner, a property owner, and get them to participate. And not every property participated, but I believe we got 4 out of 6 storefronts. So, you know, this is the kind of thing that we went back to them with. This is a menu of options and the kinds of improvements that they could select from. Again, some more menus of options that retailers received and ideas for how they could make their improvements. So at the beginning of this project, you know, we had one existing retail business. You can see it highlighted here. It was an antique store. After, it was a good, I would say, 9 to 10 months of working through permitting, of repainting, of doing, you know, the construction. And over the course of the project, and by the time we actually unveiled the project, we had 2 new retail businesses, a knick-knack store and a gift store that sold local crafts, which you can see there. And within 18 to 12 months of the project, you know, within completion, we had a mixed-use development on that vacant lot at the end, and this total of 3 new restaurants filling in all the spaces. And I'll pass it back to Sandy. She can speak to what's happened since then.
So what has happened is that it happened very quickly. I mean, we didn't think that it was going to happen as quickly as it did, but the renovation of the vacant lot at the corner was actually amazing. And this year, the one building, the building that's kind of like pink and teal, was an ice cream store that had closed before we started the project. And the new owners took it over. They repainted the building under the project, and it became Stock, which is a Vietnamese restaurant that gets great reviews throughout the city, and there's generally lines because the problem is that it's very small inside, but it has amazing food. So if you're ever in Philadelphia, you should stop by the 300 block of Girard Avenue and go to Stock. And then at the corner, the new building was built, and that has 4 apartments upstairs, and then Girard on Girard is a restaurant on the corner. And it's a different concept because it's a business that does breakfast and brunch, but you do not tip. All the prices included in the food, so that's a little bit different, and that has caused it to get a lot of publicity also. But short of this block, what's happened is on the adjacent blocks, more stores have come in. The residents have planted all trees, so if you look up Marlborough Street, you can see all new little trees that have come in because it's more spin-off from Girard Avenue. All of Girard Avenue now has trees, and so it's really been a tremendous transformation, much more than we ever thought was going to happen. Next. And so it's now become a place where the residents on the block are also doing stuff, and they are starting to brand the block, and they have been doing events, which is kind of fun. So in the neighborhood, we do a First Friday, and businesses all along Girard Avenue have participated. And in previous years before this project, it was only on Girard Avenue. but now it's also all along. I mean, it was only on Frankfurt Avenue, and now it's all the way up Girard Avenue, which is bringing out more and more people and getting more excitement in the neighborhood. But in addition to just First Fridays, the residents in the 300 block of East Girard Avenue have been doing some other events to bring people out in the springtime, and in the fall they do a thing around Christmas where they get a lot of businesses out, so that's been really nice. Next. The other thing that happened is, of course, we've gotten a lot of press because of these projects, and while we knew we had to scribe and there was going to be write-ups about what we were doing, we didn't expect for all of the other outlets to also be doing stories about this. So we have, various blogs and social media that have been doing this, the local newspapers, the city newspapers, and it has really been given Girard Avenue an identity that we wouldn't have had we not done this project. And I think the amazing thing is that, for such a little bit of money, it has had such a transformation for not just this block, but for the surrounding blocks and across the street. So it's really been something that has been, very positive for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sandy and Larissa. Let me just share my screen. And I want to thank once again Joel and Elizabeth and Terry for joining us. We will move into a question-answer session. I don't know if we've gotten a whole lot of questions coming in through the Q&A. But here's some coming at me right now. So we've been assembling these questions, and I'm going to see how many we can answer in the time we have allotted, in those 15 minutes. So this first one is for Terry. Someone's still on. So, Terry, here's a question for you. What is the link to the TOD study guide you referenced?
Where is the link? It's on the LISC Phoenix website, and it's under publications.
Okay, could you, what is the URL, the address for the LISC Phoenix site?
Oh, okay, that was on the end slide. It's www.lisc.org/Phoenix.
Okay. Also for you, Terry, can you talk about the role of the local planning department in planning for land use change around the light rail stop? Was any rezoning necessary?
Sure. So we actually started a process with the city in 2010 where they did an overlay called the Central Main Plan, and it was an overlay for the, actually it was about a 6-mile planning area, about 1 mile north or south.
Who should that go to? Is that Larissa?
Corridor east, north and south.
Number 8. I'll see if I can find out.
It was a 3-mile extension that opened in August, and an additional 3 miles where the construction has started for the new extension. And yes, we did all kinds of new zoning. We actually adopted a form-based code for the central corridor in the downtown area that was optional, and just recently they made it actually mandatory for anybody that wants to come in and do, reuse of the building in the central business district, which is about a 1 square mile area. So 25, I believe, community members were involved in that central main area planning. And it took 2 years to get through the planning process where they kind of did almost block by block what they thought the uses should be for that area. We had actually done it west area plan for the initial segment of light rail that came into our city about a mile into the city, and that was done in 2006. Where we talked more about transit-oriented kind of businesses and land use, but we didn't adopt the form-based code until 2012. And I want to go really quick, tell you that I looked on another screen, and if you go to our website and you click under News and then Publications, you'll see the guidebook right there, the first one on the top left.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we have a question now for Larissa, so I'm going to find Larissa and unmute her. There she is. So, Larissa, can you talk about the role of the local planning department in planning for and implementing community revitalization? Was there an existing small area plan that supported the revitalization? And also, in your case also, was there any rezoning necessary?
No, the idea behind this project was that we wanted to identify something that was that we're able to accomplish very quickly, that to some degree was cosmetic but very catalytic, and so, it wasn't necessary to engage the planning department or address any rezoning issues.
Sandy, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think the only thing that we did have a little bit of difficulty with was the signage, because we did have to get approval from the city for the new signage, and that was a little more cumbersome than we thought it was going to be.
Okay. And we have a question here for Joel. Joel, you out there?
I'm here.
Okay, so what advice do you have for commercial revitalization entities that cannot afford to hire a consultant or LISC to compile and make sense of data?
Well, first, there's a wealth of information out there on the internet with instructions, guidebooks, and information that can help. Larissa Ortiz, who's on the conference today, put out a really nice booklet sponsored by the International Council of Shopping Centers on attracting new businesses to their community, and she could give the link for that. Also, the LISC Metro Edge website can connect you with people who have good information. The National Main Street Center has some good publications on doing this kind of work. But the other thing is it's very useful to identify some of the small-scale projects that don't really require a lot of money and consultants. The cleanup, fix-up, safety issues really can be done without a lot of expertise. It just takes organizing neighborhood residents and businesses to make it happen. And that's really the start to really getting anything good going. Beyond that, going to the next level is reaching out and using social media to tell the story of what you're doing, and doing it repeatedly, because that generates interest, and that also generates your ability to raise resources to do more expensive or more extensive projects.
Thank you, Joel. We have another question that's come in that I think would be very good for Sandy, and Larissa can jump in as well. It looks like all the sidewalks and streetscape elements on Girard are new. How did this come about? Was the model block project established in this corridor because of the fresh infrastructure, or was it just a coincidence?
I would say it's more coincidence. We had been able to get a grant through the state to do new curbs and sidewalks and some other infrastructure, so the trees and some of the planters and everything were done through that program, as opposed to the model block. You have to remember, the model block program was only $25,000. So that covered the paint, the architects, and things of that nature. But the curbs and sidewalks and everything were done under the state program.
And if I could jump in, this is Larissa. One of the reasons why we selected and wanted to work on East Girard was because they were having, much like in Mesa, major streetscape work being completed, and we had the desire to sort of see the impact on businesses over time. So I think that was part of what made it such an exciting opportunity. There was infrastructure and transportation investment happening.
And I want to give Elizabeth the chance to remark after having heard some of the questions that were asked, and also having the benefit of all of the presentations being done. I was wondering, Elizabeth, if there was anything that you would want to add to for our listeners.
Sure. I guess a lot of what we've been hearing is some of these early action projects that really add the momentum that's needed to attract investment. So there's obviously a really clear intersection between, thinking about the best way to use the resources you have and then implementing them in a very clear and coordinated way. And then I think even more importantly, finding a way to communicate those successes. Those are things that all the panelists have really talked about, using social media, finding projects that have a great impact and that people can visually see. So it's exciting to hear how all this work plays out in different markets. And yeah, I think it's exciting.
I would ask a State Farm question to say, be honest, we don't remember who talked about it.
Now, we don't remember exactly who talked about this, but I want to make sure that someone asked a question, if there can be some more discussion and more deeper information discussed regarding the State Farm facade grant. Whoever wants to pipe in, just go ahead and unmute yourself and go.
Did they mean the PNC fund?
Maybe.
Not State Farm?
Maybe that's what they were referring to, because I don't remember hearing State Farm. That's why I was...
Yeah, no, I don't remember State Farm either, although they do fund work.
That was Terry who talked about it, because they used those State Farm resources to do work in Mesa.
Terry?
Yeah. State Farm funded the Activate the Alleyway program, which was a grant program. They support LISC Phoenix commercial corridor work in Tempe along Apache Boulevard and in Mesa on Main Street. And that's what we used the funds for in 2013.
How did they lure State Farm?
Yeah, how did you guys lure State Farm into this? How did you get them involved, and what kind of, what was it that brought them to the table? Sure.
State Farm is a supporter of LISC across the country, and we're fortunate enough that here in the Valley, State Farm has a new regional headquarters, and so they're investing in the transit corridor in the hopes that the 8,000 employees that are going to work at this regional center will live close to the light rail and use our transit line to get back and forth to work. And so it's a fairly new investment for State Farm here locally to invest in this commercial corridor. But we're hoping that because these corridors are in low-income areas, if we can get some of the corridor looking good, we can attract some residential developers, apartment complexes. These are all entry-level employees, maybe some home ownership opportunities down the line. But make them attractive enough that these entry-level employees would consider living close to the rail and using that as their transportation to and from work.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we have another question that has come in that I'm pretty sure is for Sandy and or Larissa. And it says, what were the temporary uses on the vacant lot that was activated and got those vacant lots moving at the end of the block?
The one thing that I neglected to mention that I think is important is that in addition to the improvements to the buildings, one of the blocks had a fence, and it's still there. It was what the architects designed are termed an interactive fence, and it had these benches that could be like folded up or down from the fence, and it ended up being a place where local performers could perform. It's still there to my knowledge, but the private development that occurred happened, on its own. I don't think that we didn't do anything to that lot. In fact, we left that lot on its own. Sandy, you have anything to add?
Sure. So the lot where the fence is, that fence is still there, and that's owned by the owner of the building next door. The corner property where the building was built, that was actually a community garden. That it was actually a private garden, but it was a garden with roses and everything. So in one of the slides, you would have seen the garden with all the roses behind the fence. So it was really very pretty, and it had, some benches and everything in there, and it was taken care of by the owner, even though he wasn't living there or anything. So it just made it a nice, cool space to be for the block.
Well, it looks like we're, folks, it looks like we're going to need to wrap up right now. We're coming to the end of our time. I did want you to see, here are here's one link to Commercial District Advisor blogspot.com that one of our panelists, I believe it was Larissa, wanted us to share. But I also wanted you all to note, here's the panelist contact info. I'll leave this up for a little bit as I read these closing comments. So this does conclude the webinar, Smart Strategies to Transform Commercial Districts. I want to thank, a big thank you out to our panelists and also to all those who attended. The complete recording of today's webinar, as well as PDFs of the slideshows, will be posted on smartgrowth.org by the end of next week. When you exit from today's webinar, you'll be directed to our evaluation. Please take the 45 to 60 seconds that it will take you to tell us what you think. The Clearinghouse will present other webinars in the near future. Keep an eye on the website and our weekly newsletter for details. And if you don't receive the weekly newsletter, please find our link on smartgrowth.org where you can be receiving that every Monday. Goodbye and smart growth.